Finally, the Rupp has come back to the BBR! Kind of. What's up guys, Ruppy here, and welcome to my draft analysis for Season 2 of the BBR-D League. The BBR, of course, standing for the Breejex Battle Royale. It is a name that is probably familiar to many of you who have watched my channel, or have at least stuck around long enough since I've returned, that you've heard me yap on about it, because I never do seem to shut up about my own past. So much so that there is actually someone else in the D League who is actually apparently keeping a running total of gaining a nickel every time I mention it. I'm probably going to make him rich after this video, or this season, whatever. Not actually paying him any of it, but all in good fun. Anyway, if the BBR does sound familiar to you, fair enough. If it does not, allow me to take you on a quick trip down memory lane. Back in the days of Generation 8, the Sword and Shield era, I was welcomed into Season 2 of the main league of BBR, where, using a team that was built around the Rillaboom Hawlucha combo, I, thanks to a bit of an unbelievable miracle in the final week of the regular season, managed to make it into playoffs as the last seed, and then proceeded to make semifinals before I got knocked out. All in all, it was a good experience. Unfortunately, I was not invited back after that season. I have my suspicions as to why it has never been confirmed, but I am not going to go into details on that. I'm just going to leave it be, because it's all in the past. We are here now, however, Season 2 of the D League for the BBR, where I do believe it has been confirmed that the D League champion is guaranteed a spot in the main roster for next season. And to be quite honest, I welcome the challenge of starting back at the very bottom and trying to work my way back up to that point. Will it happen? Well, we will see. And a lot of that's going to depend on the roster I have drafted. So, for the BBR-D League, we had 110 points to draft anywhere between 9 and 11 Mons total. And of the 16 teams that were in this league, I had spot number 15. Basically, near the back wheel. Which, statistically, at least this generation, that's been the golden pick for me. I honestly feel some of my best drafts and some of the best seasons I've had so far this generation have come from having that pick right before the back wheel. I believe that was the case in UNPL this past season as well, and, well, my run there kind of speaks for itself at this point. So, with that in mind, being able to kind of take my time and plan ahead, there were a couple of ideas I was considering. One possibility was maybe gunning for Iron Valiant, and trying to see if I could rebuild the Fairy Dragon Steel Core that basically kickstarted the nightmare that UNPL had to deal with from me this past season. That was dashed because Iron Valiant went off the board fairly quickly, which, you know what, completely fair. It is a very good mon and draft format for a reason. Another option that I had proposed, and I think a lot of the coaches were actually on board with it as a gentleman's agreement thing, which is an absurd thought to me. I had pitched the idea of basically being allowed via gentleman's agreement to lock off 8 Mons specifically to redraft my old roster from Main League Season 2 to see how it fared in this new meta. The 2 Mons that would not have been drafted would have been Marowak and Druddigon because they do not exist in this generation. So there was a bit of wiggle room there between points and needing at least 1 more Mon to have a proper roster that I could have used to kind of fill the gaps. And I had actually considered going for Garchomp as a compression of what Marowak and Druddigon brought to the table to actually make that a reality. But Garchomp got sniped for me as well, so I decided to scrap that plan. It was a fun thought, but, you know, out with the old, in with the new. Going off of that philosophy, there was a mon that caught my attention when my pick did come up. It is a mon I've never really used in draft format, or otherwise for that matter. And it's really interesting because I feel this Mon could actually work out for me if I play my cards right. And it is a Mon that does force a good amount of prep, and it's one that has actually destroyed me in this recent season of the UNPL in one of the very few losses I did end up taking before my season ended. Deviating away from the Fairy Dragon Steel first mindset that has kind of worked out the best for me in a lot of scenarios, I decided for my first pick to grab Spectrio. Spectrio is a very interesting Mon. It is quite fast. It has incredible special attack. It's got good HP too, surprisingly. Its defensive stats are not the worst, honestly. They're usable. But Spectrio is honestly a lot more than, compared to the likes of, say, Chi-Yu and Iron Bundle, which are basically just very powerful, click button, things happen kind of Mons. I guess GM Power kind of also works into that regard as well. But what makes Spectrio stand out is that while it is somewhat limited and does feel like it falls in that role, there's just enough versatility there that I could potentially make something work if I wanted to kind of deviate away from the norm. Not to mention, Spectrio has the ability Grim Neigh, which boosts its special attack every time it gets a KO. If having Gyarados as a Terra Captain in the recent season of the UNPL taught me anything, Mons that can snowball very quickly and very easily are probably the kinds of Pokemon you want kept away from me. So the fact that Spectrio was allowed to fall to me, I feel there's some very good things I could make happen just from that alone. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Coming back to me after the back wheel pick, I started thinking about how I build a team around Spectrio. The first thing that stood out to me is I got a powerful special attacker. Maybe I should look into a powerful physical attacker as well to kind of help balance it. I also began looking for things that kind of offset the two weaknesses that Spectrio does have, that being Ghost and Dark. I have learned the hard way that having a very exploitable Ghost weakness is a problem I would rather not have anymore. I learned that lesson the hard way because of Spectrio, so I don't want to repeat that history. And there was a Mon that actually works really well, I think, in conjunction with Spectrio to do just that, while also covering at least one of those weaknesses. For my second pick, I grabbed Ursal Luna. Ursal Luna is a Mon I have used in the past. It is, in some respects, the polar opposite of Spectrio. It is a very powerful physical attacker, hits like a truck on the physical end, just as Spectrio does on the special end. It is significantly bulkier than Spectrio in the grand scheme of things. It is much slower as well, so I've got a huge speed gap I now need to kind of close the distance between. But I feel that gives me a lot of room to work with for building a roster. Especially since with its normal typing, Ursal Luna covers the Ghost weakness that Spectrio does have. And Ursal Luna does have some really good abilities going for it as well that really make this thing the threat that people have recognized it as. Unnerve is kind of a niche option if you're predicting berries. But Bulletproof absolutely works if you're predicting things like, say, Aura Sphere from a special attacker, especially a special fighting type, or anything of that sort, to kind of shut those down or maybe give some interesting coverage to another Mon. Guts is the big one, though, because Guts Ursal Luna flattens teams if you are not careful. It forces the prep of being cautious about just spreading status willy-nilly. It makes people think twice about potentially trying to set up toxic spikes against me, because Ursal Luna could definitely take advantage of that. Also, I could just, run a Flame Orb set, and now I've got a monster on my hands. There is a lot to like about Ursal Luna, and I think it actually complements Spectrio really nicely from the offensive end of things. Going into round 3, the first thing that I knew I wanted was a Steel type, because the Steel type in general I think really benefits both Ursal Luna and Spectrio. And there was one in particular I was already thinking of, because it is a Mon that has served me quite well in the past, that being Scyther. However, Scyther was sniped from me, which kind of caught me off guard. I didn't think Scyther would be that big of a priority for someone. it is a defogger, which is one of the reasons I wanted it, but beyond that, it's just a really solid steel type in general. But that is fine, because I found another steel type that I think works just as well, if not better, with Spectrio and Ursal Luna, as well as some of the other mons that I've drafted that you will see soon enough. For my third pick, I grabbed Metagross. Metagross is an interesting mon. It also hits like a truck on the physical end. It's got a very usable special attack. Its bulk is phenomenal. 70 speed is not the worst. It's a step towards closing the speed gap between Spectrio and Ursal Luna. Metagross gives me rocks, which is very much appreciated because I have not sought out hazards up to this point. It complements, well, it does kind of stack on some of the weaknesses that Spectrio brings to the table. It also covers a decent chunk of Ursal Luna's weaknesses as well, and vice versa. So that is definitely appreciated. So with Metagross in hand, almost forgot to mention the priority bullet punch that Metagross brings with it. That is always appreciated. Gotta love me some good priority. But with Metagross claimed now, we had the back wheel, we came back to me, and I already knew what I wanted for my fourth pick. Because it is a mon that I think really complements Spectrio, Ursal Luna, and Metagross well in many respects. And it's just an overall nuisance I haven't gotten to use in a very long time that I think makes this team even more dangerous than it's already looking at this point. My fourth pick was Grimmsnarl. Grimmsnarl is a nuisance. That is probably the best way I can describe this mon. It has really solid offensive stats. It's got good HP. Kind of close to the speed gap between Metagross and Ursal Luna, which is a weird thought to say. But being Dark Fairy gives Grimmsnarl a lot of advantages. Namely the fact that, in terms of weaknesses, it synergizes incredibly well with Metagross. Obviously, the big thing for Grimmsnarl, however, is its access to Prankster. Prankster Grimmsnarl is absolutely annoying. It can set up screens, which really makes Spectrio, Ursal Luna, and even Metagross so much more dangerous with the bulk, especially the latter two with the bulk they possess. And Spectrio being able to live hits is not what you want for a mon that can easily snowball if I get it into position. I can also Thunder Wave. Parting Shot is always an option, which further sets up the likes of Spectrio, Ursal Luna, Metagross, some of the other mons I've drafted. We'll get to it soon enough. Grimmsnarl can be an absolute nuisance. It is a very annoying mon to face. It really makes you think about your prep about what is this thing gonna bring to try to annoy me, and how do I deal with it. And I think Grimmsnarl is gonna be a good glue mon to really help bring this team together. That said, as we got back to me, I knew I wanted a couple of things based on what I had. A dedicated special attacker would be really nice because my team, while Metagross and Grimmsnarl can kind of go mixed, they are definitely more physically leaning. I also wanted to properly address the ground weakness that Metagross has, well, the ground and fire weakness that Metagross has, so I have nothing that really does so quite yet. Anything helping Metagross deal with a potential fairy weakness to make Grimmsnarl's job a little easier is certainly appreciated as well. And I knew I kind of wanted to, since I had a Steel Fairy, I thought I could wait on my dragon. So I wanted to start looking towards my Fire, Water, Grass core. Also, I wanted to consider an electric type, because electric types are always appreciated in draft. And there is a mon that actually kind of fits all those roles. That is Rotom-Heat. With Levitate, Rotom-Heat is immune to ground, which is good because it would be quad weak otherwise. Fire Electric is a very usable typing. I've had hit or miss seasons with Rotom forms, but I feel Rotom-Heat actually works really nicely with this team, especially in being able to pivot around with Volt Switches to kind of get under the skin of a lot of things. Any ground types that want to come in, they really can't touch Rotom-Heat. They don't want to be taking over heat, so the physical ones do not want to risk eating Will-O-Wisps, or maybe I could throw out Thunder Waves to paralyze things. Rotom-Heat is a mon that has a lot going for it, especially since its bulk is actually really solid. So, I'm looking forward to getting to use Rotom-Heat again and seeing how I can make it work here. So with round 5 in the book, we had the wheel pick, got back to me right away, and at this point, I was looking towards my water types. And I considered a water fighting type, because, honestly, I felt that actually helped close up a lot of the holes I still had in this team. I really wanted to get Urshifu Rapid Strike, because it's a mon I hate facing. It's a mon that I have not gotten a chance to use, and it was actually still on the board at this point, which is an absurd thought, honestly. But ultimately, I talked myself out of it in favor of a different water fighting type, because, quite frankly, I didn't want my team getting too physically heavy at this point. So I decided to go with Keldeo instead. Keldeo does have some physical options despite not having the greatest attack stat. Its special attack stat is really good. Base 108 speed gives me another mon above base 100 to help really close the speed gap between Spectrio and everything else I've drafted up to this point. Justified can be usable if I could consider making a physical Keldeo set work, because of the +1 boost I get to attack after getting hit with a Dark-type move. Keldeo threatening Dark types in general was actually kind of needed at this point to help back up Grimmsnarl in terms of dealing with that potential weakness. Keldeo is a mon I don't think I've really used before, kind of like Spectrio, but I'm willing to go double horse and see how well it works out, because Keldeo, I think, has a lot going for it that I could really take advantage of, especially with everything else I've got going at this point. So, 6 picks in, I'm liking how my team is looking, but I have some cores I need to finish, and some more hazards wouldn't be a bad idea either, because I've only got Metagross setting Stealth Rocks, and that's about it at this point. So I figured I should get some variety. I actually found a dragon that kind of accomplishes this task, while also filling the role of a grounded poison that is actually very necessary in draft format, I feel like, these days, because of how much Toxic Spikes can ruin your day if you're not careful. They're not so much an issue with my team up to this point, because Rotom-Heat has Levitate, Metagross is immune because of Steel type, and Ursal Luna's Guts kind of make you think twice about it anyway. But it doesn't hurt to have that option just as a safety net. So I grabbed my old friend, Dragalge. I had Dragalge on my UNPL Season 3 roster, and I feel I didn't get a chance to really make the most of it. And I want to give it its due, because this mon is actually incredible. Adaptability off a base 97 attack means its Dragon and Poison moves are actually hitting absurdly hard. Its 44 speed is kind of iffy, but I do have Trick Room potential here with Dragalge and Ursal Luna if I can just draft a Trick Room setter. But Dragalge's bulk in general is also really good. It has a lot of resistances. The few things it's weak to, I've got solid coverage for at this point. So I honestly feel like Dragalge adds a lot to this team. Plus, having my own Toxic Spikes to set is always appreciated because of the aforementioned, because of what I've already said up to this point about Toxic Spikes and how devastating they could be if you do not have a grounded poison or if you're not careful. So after the wheel picking coming back to me again, I knew I wanted a grass type this round to kind of close up my Firewater Grass core. One other thing that quickly jumped out at me, however, is the fact that I have no removal at this point, and most of the good removal options were long gone. Which is kind of a problem, obviously. Because, I should have learned my lesson with UNPL Season 4 and how I got knocked out of playoffs there. But here I am making the same mistakes again. Maybe I can make it work this time, however, because I do have a mon that could be a potentially solid hazard remover, and provides a few other things for my team that are quite interesting. So, for my grass type, I decided to go with Bramblegast. Bramblegast is an interesting mon. At base 90 speed, it also, again, helps close up my speed gap a bit. Base 115 attack is really solid. It doesn't seem like it's got a whole lot going for it beyond that, though. I mean, it's got Infiltrator to get through opposing screens and subs, And Wind Rider kind of shuts down anything that wants to throw out, like, hurricanes or anything of the like. So that's always appreciated. Brambleghast can spin. It's got some interesting defensive options, too. Like, I believe it gets Leech Seed. I know it gets Strength Sap, which is crazy, especially for a mon that is not meant to be a wall or a tank. But Brambleghast does have some interesting options going for it, and I think it is. I am doubling up on ghost types at this point, but I think I've got solid coverage at this point on a lot of things that I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue. And I mean, having a second ghost type isn't the worst thing in the world. I mean, Hopeless kind of proved that when he used both Mischievous and Spectrio to run through me in UNPL Season 4, so there is that. So Brambleghast is going to be an interesting pick, and I'm excited to get to see what I can do with it. So we're moving on to round 9 at this point. I don't have a lot of options left in terms of points, but I definitely have some options I'm considering, especially since I still need to think about a Terra Captain. So how the BBR-D League is doing Terra Captains, I guess I should address that real quick. You only get one Terra Captain. That Terra Captain has to be a 10-point or below mon. In case you're curious, Gyarados was put at 11 points, so I couldn't have considered that even if I wanted to. You guys are clever. That one and only Terra Captain from 10 points and below is allowed to Terrasilize into any typing. But we are running Terra Preview rules, so I do have to disclose what Terra type I am bringing before we actually go into battle. It's basically the same kind of mindset that was used for the BBR Summer Scramble. The same Terra rules there, except for the 10 point and below thing, because I don't believe the D-League operate under that, or the Summer Scramble operate under that. At this point, my only eligible Terra Captains are Dragalge and Brambleghast, which are solid Terra options, don't get me wrong. But there's another mon that caught my attention that I have not used in draft format, but I kind of wanted to give a shot to. And I think it actually kind of works incredibly well with this team if I play my cards right in a very disgusting way, to put it in one phrase of speaking, I guess. I grabbed Porygon II with my 9th pick. Porygon II is the mother of all walls. 85, 90, 95 is a really usable bulk spread all on its own. But the fact that this thing can use Eviolite because of the evolution into Porygon Z makes the thing a royal pain in the ass to take down. Its normal typing is also very usable. It's got 3 fantastic abilities in Trace, which allows it to basically copy the ability of whatever is in front of it, if I can. Download, which boosts its attack or special attack based on whatever defense is lower on the mon it comes in on. And Analytic, which actually gives its attacks a power boost if Porygon 2 moves last, which, given it's got 60 base speed, will probably be happening a lot of the time. Remember how I said I had Trick Room potential in Ursal Luna and Dragalge? Well, Porygon 2 can set Trick Room, which actually makes it kind of a nasty piece of work on this team because of being able to set up those two to outspeed everything. Not to mention it's a solid Trick Room mon in its own right. This thing is the definition of bulky attacker. And I did decide to declare this thing my Terra Captain because I think Porygon 2 actually has some really interesting options it could bring to the table as a Terra Captain that I can work with, especially to kind of fill in a few gaps and just make this thing even more impossible to kill than it already is, just in its base form. So at this point, I had 7 points left going into round 10. And I didn't want to call my draft right here because I thought I could probably make those 7 points work in some capacity. And I did find a mon that I feel could potentially work out for me in that respect. It helps close a few speed tiers. It gives me some extra removal, so I'm not stuck with just one mon doing all the heavy lifting, like was the case with Scyther in my last UMPL run. It is actually related to Scyther, though. For my last pick, I took Scyther. Base 105 speed is really good for Scyther to be able to take advantage of a lot of things, like its Swarm ability, if it's knocked low enough, or Technician, which is a really solid ability, all things considered. This thing could potentially run Eviolite if I decide to go that route. It can U-turn, which now gives me U-turn with this mon, Volt Switch with Rotom-Heat, and Flip Turn with Dragology to be able to utilize. It can defog, so again, Brambleghast doesn't have to do the heavy lifting for potential removal now. Scyther has a lot going for it, and being a bug flying type, I think actually kind of helps patch up a few holes that I still had in this team, and gives me a few more options to play with on that front. So that is going to be the team. Will it work out? I'm hopeful. This roster looks really solid on paper to me, and I'm really excited to be able to get to use it. Because there's a lot of toys here I have not gotten the chance to play with yet. There's some toys I have used in the past that I'm really excited to get to use again. And all in all, I think there's a lot of flexibility with this team that I could utilize given all the tools I have to play with. Because, well, I love me some versatility, and I'm excited to get to toy around with things and see what I can make work. So, with all that said, I hope you guys support the Columbus Swoo during this BBR-D League season. Thank you guys so very much for watching. I have been Ruppy, and I will see you guys next time when our BBR-D League journey begins proper. Take care.